Yo, SMP and PMU artists, let me put you on game. I'm David Santiago with Hustle Butter, and if you're not using our products in your studio yet, you're missing out. For real. This isn't just some aftercare bomb. Hustle Butter is a full line of premium products trusted by top SMP and PMU artists worldwide, including moi. I use it during every session and make sure my clients leave with it in hand. But here's the real play. You can become an authorized Hustle Butter wholesaler. That means discounted pricing, a dedicated rep, and $40 off your first order. Stock your studio, resell to your clients, and create a solid stream of extra income. Artists and studios around the world are selling Hustle Butter every single day. Why not you? Sign up takes less than 60 seconds. Head to hustlebutter.com, click wholesale, and lock it in. This is Hustle Butter, and you already know you can't knock the hustle. Since 2008, Bishop has been one of the most reputable brands in the tattoo industry. And it goes without saying why that same quality transitions seamlessly into the SMP industry. From their SMP Power Wand built for precision and comfort, to SMP specific needles designed for flawless impressions, and pigments engineered for consistency, you're working with the best in the game. I trust Bishop SMP because they set the standard for artists who want to elevate their craft. Level up your results. Visit bishopsmp.com and experience the difference. What's going on, everyone? Welcome back to the Scalp Solutions Podcast. I'm your host, David Santiago. This episode is a direct follow-up to my last podcast titled When SMP Artists Should Work with a Marketing Company and Why Most of You Are Not Ready Yet. That episode hit a nerve. A lot of artists reached out, some agreeing, some uncomfortable, and some realizing for the first time that marketing wasn't their problem. Preparation was. So instead of just talking about marketing agencies, I wanted to bring back someone who actually operates on that side of the business and who's been on the show multiple times before. Today, I'm joined once again by James Viola of Seven Figure SMP. If you've been listening to the podcast for a while, you already know James. He's been on the show before, and every time the conversation goes deeper because this isn't just about selling ads. It's about building businesses that are actually ready to scale. And in this episode, we're breaking down when artists are truly ready to hire marketing agencies, why most artists think ads don't work, what marketing companies can and cannot do for your business, and how real growth happens when the foundation is built first. This isn't an episode about bashing agencies. It's about selling, and it's not about selling leads. And I'm going to leave that there because this is a very long introduction. It's important. You need to hear this. Pay attention. All right, guys. This is about accountability, about readiness, and understanding how marketing actually works in the SMP and PMU industry. So if you listened to the last episode and you felt called out, confused, or even validated, this episode is the response. Let's get into it. What's up, James? Welcome back to the podcast. This might be the first time some artists hear about you. Let them know real quick who you are and what you do.
Hey, Dave. First and foremost, thanks for having me back on. Secondly, as far as who I am and what I do, I'm James. I'm the founder of Seven Figure SMP. What we do is help scalp micropigmentation artists to get more clients and grow their business profitably. We do that through several different mechanisms, which obviously we're going to touch on during this podcast. And ultimately, I've had an agency since 2017. I got SMP done in 2019, and then that clinic asked me to run their ads starting in 2020. So I've been running ads in the SMP space since 2020. We really only ran it for that one original clinic for about 2.5 years. Had great success there, and then started rolling it out to other artists throughout the United States, Canada, UK, and Australia. And at this point, we've worked with over 200 different scalp micropigmentation artists throughout the world.
That's a lot of experience there, brother. So from your experience, because you said it's been over 200 artists, from your experience, what are the biggest mistakes that SMP or PMU artists, and I'll throw PMU artists in there James, because we're starting to get them listening into the podcast as well too. So I figured they could benefit from some of the value that you're about to give. So let me recap that. So from your experience, what are the biggest mistakes that SMP or PMU artists make before they even hire a marketing agency?
Yeah, a lot of times it comes down to not necessarily getting the right foundation in place prior. They're kind of putting the cart before the horse sometimes. And what I mean when I say that is obviously you want to have the right foundation in place with regards to a website, Google business profile, socials that match, and then also really getting comfortable with talking about scalp micropigmentation or permanent makeup with everybody and anybody who will listen, to the point where it's almost annoying, right?
For sure.
And what I mean when I say that is talking to people in person about it, right? Face to face. And then also kind of getting comfortable in front of the camera, right? Or even getting uncomfortable in front of the camera, because obviously, and probably as well as I do, that, you don't start off being comfortable in front of the camera. I know for myself, I was super uncomfortable in front of the camera for many years, while conducting my business, but forced myself to do it anyway.
Now you a Hollywood stunt double now, bro. So
I don't know about all
hear a lot
that.
of
I'm no you. I'm no you.
no, I'm not there yet. Maybe two more. I'm two more podcast episodes from reaching that status. So you hear a lot of artists say that ads don't work all the time. When someone says that to you, what do you already know is probably broken in their business?
There's definitely a couple of different potential scenarios there when it comes to scalp micropigmentation and PMU. I mean, at the end of the day, your portfolio in and of itself speaks volumes, right? So when it comes to attracting attention, that's one thing, and then taking that attention and converting it into a consultation and eventually a paying new client requires different things, right? So there's not just the portfolio, obviously the follow-up and sales process, right? So those would be the three things, aside from attracting the attention in the first place, that are likely an issue when somebody says that ads don't work, unless they're running ads and they're just not even getting leads in the first place, which doesn't usually seem to be the scenario, right? A lot of times it's like, hey, I'm getting leads, but they're tire kickers, or they think it's going to grow hair out of their head, or I can't get them on the phone after I generate the lead in the first place. But at the end of the day, it's like, how many times are you following up? How often are you following up? And a lot of people are even shy about that. Even established artists tend to be a little trigger shy when it comes to actually following up the amount of times that it's required to, in order to actually create a conversion. They used to say it was 7 touch points. I think the most recent study that I read says it's now up to 13 touch points, from when somebody initially engages with your business to when they convert. Now, that doesn't mean you have to call them 13 times necessarily, but that's touch points across ads, text message follow-up, email follow-up, phone calls, etc. So that's what you need to be honest with yourself about, is like, am I actually generating leads in the first place? And if I am I following up with them immediately and often enough and consistently enough over the course of time to actually convert the percentage of people that I need to, in order to make everything profitable at the end?
I've had conversation with artists, even some of the established artists, when it comes to following up and listening to some of them. I don't want to say that they're ignorant, because some people just don't know how to take that word, but they're ignorant to the whole follow-up process, because they'll say things like, oh, I'm not going to keep calling them back because that makes me appear desperate. And it's kind of like, what do you mean that makes you appear desperate? Like, I don't understand who's putting that information out there, who gives out their advice, or where they're learning their business skills from, that they say, if I reach out more than once, twice, it makes me look desperate. And then the client looks at me and they think that I'm just calling them out of desperation. But then when you read off, or you learn about facts, where I always thought there were 7 touch points, but you're saying now that's increased to 13. So it's kind of like, if you're uncomfortable with just doing that initial follow-up because you think that's going to make you look desperate, imagine how you think you're going to feel when you really start playing the game that you're supposed to, and you do a minimum of 3 or 4 follow-ups, or whatever, 4 of the touch points out of the 7 or the 13.
Yeah, and I mean, at the end of the day, it's not hard to figure out, whether or not you followed up enough or not, right? Because one of the easiest things you can do is follow up with the leads that you already have on your list. So, you'll I mean, the unfortunate reality is if you haven't been following up with them and you do out of the blue follow up with your entire list, what you'll find is you'll say, "Hey, like, yeah, I already got it done by XYZ person, down the street from you," or whatever the case may be, right? Because every time we do what we call a reactivation, or, basically a mass follow up with a list of an artist's leads, it's guaranteed that a handful of them are going to say something like that. Like, "Hey, I already ended up getting it done. I'm super happy with it," etc. Which means that you generated a qualified lead who did want to get it done and also did get it done, but you didn't follow up often enough or quickly enough in the first place to be the artist that they went.
And there's so many other things I think you can download off of that, because it's like, all right, maybe you can look. Part of me, man, like that, I want to go into that, but you know what? I will, because it's kind of like, all right, now you can. What I would do when I found that out was, all right, now I'm going to go to that artist. I'm going to look at all their socials, what kind of ads they're running, X, Y, Z. What are they doing that I'm not doing? And then I pivot. Is that a good strategy?
I mean, it doesn't hurt. You should have insight into what they're
Competition.
doing, but at the same time, of course, you'd be better served to put that effort, that time, energy, and effort into continuing to follow up with your own
Follow up.
list. And really kind of work on your own sales process and sales skills, of course. And when I talk about sales skills, I'm not talking about convincing people to do it. I'm talking about being consultative and helping them to arrive at the right decision for them. And obviously, the idea is to first guide them towards scalp micropigmentation or whatever service it is that you're offering as the solution for them, and then positioning yourself as the person to do their scalp micropigmentation procedure. So yeah, so that's what I would say as it pertains to that aspect.
Got you. Who is not a good fit for Seven Figure SMP? Like, who should not hire you yet?
Yeah, so I mean, when somebody is just starting out and they don't, already have, half a dozen to say 12 heads in their portfolio, it's going to make it way more difficult on the paid advertising side to convert people into paying new clients. No matter how good your ads are, no matter how good your follow-up processes are and all that other kind of good stuff that we're talking about, at the end of the day, the proof is in the pudding, right? So
Sure.
when you have a minimal amount of work or maybe no work, the thing that you should be doing is putting the right foundation in place, right? And we do have actually a starter package for people, to build out their website and their socials and their Google business profile and help them to rank organically and stuff like that, which is a good place to start. But ultimately, if anybody has any sliver of technical ability, they probably really are better off doing that on their own at first. And, the thing that I always try to guide artists who are fresh out of training toward is getting comfortable talking about scalp micropigmentation to anyone and everyone who will listen, to the point where it might feel annoying to them, to themselves, right? Like, oh man, I'm having a ridiculous amount of these conversations. And then also getting comfortable speaking on camera, right? Or maybe even getting uncomfortable speaking on camera, because as we mentioned previously, nobody starts out, being comfortable on camera right out of the gate. Because I think that they need to capitalize on that excitement and that momentum that they have right out of training, right? And, obviously being willing to offer the service for a heavy discount or even free initially to build up that portfolio is something that they need to be willing to do, because, building that initial 6 to 12 heads, in my estimation, is worth so much more than whatever dollar amount that that client could have given you. And it's not like you're getting nothing in return, right? You're going to give it to them for free in exchange for, you have to be willing for me to use you in your marketing. So there's still an exchange that happens there. You're not giving them the service for absolutely nothing, right? You are getting something super valuable in return in the form of.
So let's say now I go with, I take those initial steps like you just spoke of. And now as an artist, my organic content still isn't converting. What usually happens if I now go and turn on paid ads?
Well, I mean, when it comes to paid advertising on social, a lot of people try to make differences between organic content and paid content. I mean, if a piece of content performs well organically, it will likely perform well as a paid ad and vice versa, right? So to answer your question more directly, like unless you're getting guidance on or having someone help you with reconfiguring or rescripting your content before you turn to paid ads, if you're literally just taking the content that's already not performing and boosting that same content, it's probably not going to go well, I would have to assume, right? Because that's certainly not what we do. Like when we script a piece of content for you, obviously, right, David? Like if it performs well organically, then we're going to put dollars behind that. And if it doesn't, then we're not, right? So I think the same would apply to an artist who's just starting out. Now, of course, you're not necessarily looking to get 1 million views or something like that organically before you run it as a paid ad. But you are looking for certain signals with regards to, not necessarily views, but engagement, right? Comments, likes, things of that nature. And also engagement from people who are not necessarily peers, right? And I think it's great for artists to support one another in terms of, liking and sharing and commenting on each other's content. But ultimately what you're looking for is engagement from people who are suffering from hair loss, right?
Sure.
And it doesn't need to be a ton, right? That's the other thing. A lot of times you'll see, representations of how many views you're getting, right? Like somebody will say like if you were live on stage and you had 500 people in front of you, that would seem like a lot. But if you only get 500 views on a reel, it feels like not enough, right?
Super interesting when the reality of it is like, dude, you just have 500 people watch your content. That's a lot.
Yep, absolutely.
At least for me, it is.
Yeah.
With my ads, because I know we use a lot of my organic content and we run them as ads. What are you essentially looking for? Like, do you have like numbers? Like with me, is there a certain amount of likes that you're looking, or are you looking at the comments that are coming from outside of my community before you take them and pass them over to the team and reach out to me like, hey, Dave, this is going to be the next ad that we run?
Yeah, definitely. Like when we see specific questions with regards to the procedure in the comment section, that's when we know it's reaching people who are not artists or whatever the case may be. So that's obviously one thing that we're looking for. And of course, we're doing a combination of using existing organic content and scripting specific content for your ads, right? And the reality is, there's tons of people who suffer from hair loss that don't even know what scalp micropigmentation is, right? Still. And this is one of the funniest things when it comes to the idea of saturation in scalp micropigmentation, because I think that if you were to walk down the street and ask 10 people what scalp micropigmentation is, at least 5 of them are not going to know what that is.
Yeah, no clue.
So how could it be saturated? How could it possibly be saturated in any market, right? And the reason I say that is because we run ads in New York City, we run ads in LA, we run ads in London, right? Like the ones where there already are the most scalp micropigmentation artists. And we still get leads every single day who ask, what is this?
What is this?
How long does it take for me to see results? Or, does it hurt? All the basic questions that if somebody knew about it, they would already know the answers to it. And that's one of the kind of the advantages that a new person has, right? Is like experienced people who are in the industry can have a tough time seeing the forest through the trees. They assume I've talked about this so many times. Everybody already knows what it is. When the reality is no one knows what it is, right?
Yeah, like no one knows who you are, bro. Relax.
Yeah, exactly.
You know what? Someone like me, I can appreciate the other artists that have that mindset, because I'm like, you keep thinking that it's saturated, buddy. I'm gonna keep pumping this out there.
Yep.
Usually when you adapt that mindset, those guys usually start slowing down because they've already shot themselves in the foot. They don't want to keep trucking. So if you want to be, you want to adapt that mindset, go right ahead. For the beasts like me, we're going to eat you alive. But we're not here to talk to get me triggered to start talking shit. Okay. When you onboard a new artist, what do you look at first before you even talk about ad spend?
Yeah, so it really starts during our sales process, to be honest with you, because, we're kind of like, I still handle all the sales calls, right? So because of that, because I still take all my own demos and things of that nature, I'm doing preliminary research to make sure that it's at least a potential fit before we even get on a call, right? And essentially what we're looking for is, for the branding to be in place and for the website to be, SEO and mobile optimized, and for the Google business listing and socials to be, consistent across all platforms and things of that nature. Because if those and obviously the portfolio for the work to actually be good, because if those things aren't in place, then we're either gonna not work with that person at this point, or if we are going to work with them at all, it's going to be kind of on our introductory, like foundational package where we're literally not even running ads. We're going to start from square one by building an SEO and mobile optimized website, optimizing your Google business profile, making sure that all of your socials are in line with, your brand name across all platforms and all that kind of good stuff. And even, going as basic as logo, color scheme, font, etc., before we ever even launch any ads, right? So yeah, if we're going to talk about ad spend, first of all those things have to be in place in the first place, right? And secondly, we have to have an idea of what your goals are, right? Because at the end of the day, I work with clients who are happy with getting 5 heads a month. And I work with artists who have multiple artists at their clinic that are looking to get 25 heads a month. So obviously the ad spend requirement, right, because there's an acquisition cost, the ad spend requirement for either of those sets of goals is going to be completely different, right? So those are kind of the things that we look for, foundational pieces and what your goals are. Those are what we need to discuss prior to establishing what your ad spend budget should be.
That leads me to this next question, because a lot of artists, they don't know their numbers. I know I did not know my numbers when I first started. How does that hurt us once ads are running by not knowing our numbers?
Yeah, I mean, it makes it impossible to know, what you should do next, right? What levers to pull. Because basically, I mean, there's 4 major metrics that we track, right? Without getting overly technical, we track cost per lead, cost per scheduled consultation, cost per shown consultation, and cost per client acquired, or cost per, person who literally sits in your chair, right? And if you don't know those numbers broadly across the entire business, then you don't know, whether a new channel is working within, kind of those key performance indicators. Or if you were to hire an agency, you wouldn't know whether they're doing a good job or a bad job, right? So you kind of need to know your own baseline, right? Like let's assume you're boosting some posts, or, maybe even running your own Google ads or running your own Facebook ads. You need to know what you're spending each month, how many leads you brought in, how many consultations were scheduled, how many of those actually showed up, and out of the ones that showed up, how many you converted into paying new clients, right? And then you can back those numbers out based on your overall spend. And that's what lets you know kind of how profitable you are, if you were profitable, assuming you were profitable. And that is what's going to give you your baseline for if you introduce a new channel. So let's say you were only doing Instagram boosted posts and that's all you were doing. And then you're still managing it internally, and then you start running Google ads. Well, you're not going to know whether those Google ads are performing well if you didn't have a baseline on what you were initially doing with the boosted Instagram posts, right? So those are really the 4 major metrics that need to be measured. And it can be tricky, right? Especially when you get into like having multiple channels running. But if you're only doing one thing, it's pretty simple. It's like, how much did I spend? How many leads did I get? How many people did I schedule for consultations? How many people did I actually talk to? And how many of them converted into paying new clients, right? And based on that, you're going to know where the drop-offs are, right? So if your cost per lead is good, but your cost per consultation is bad, you have to look at what's happening in between when the person becomes a lead and when they schedule a consultation. And then if your cost per consultation is good, but your cost per show is bad, then what's happening in between the time that they book and the time that their consultation happens. And then if the show rate on your consultations is good, cost per show is good, and your cost per client acquired is still bad, then you kind of have to look at what's happening during your actual sales process. And if you don't know those metrics along the way, you don't even know where the leak in the bucket is. So how can you plug it?
For sure. Now, that same format would apply to all the different channels that you decide to go down, right? So if you're just doing Instagram boosts, if you want to do TikTok ads, Facebook, Instagram, and I believe I said Google's, right? Same strategy. You're now just multiplying it for every single. Got you. How often do you see artists come to you out of panic instead of preparation? And how do you handle that?
More often than I'd like, of course, because it doesn't put them in a position where they're able to kind of like move forward confidently with, a quarter's worth of budget to invest into their campaigns and have the patience to get everything running like a well-oiled machine. So yeah, it happens more often than I'd like it to be honest with you. When somebody comes to me and they are prepared, it's obviously a breath of fresh air because panic is more often than not the thing that we see.
You can send someone 50 leads a week, but if they don't answer the phone or follow up, what happens?
Well, it's the same. It goes back to the same thing that we just talked about in terms of the key metrics, right? Because that's going to obviously lead cost, based on what you just said, lead cost is good. Consultation cost is not going to be good, right? Because if we're not following up the leads timely and frequently enough, then we're not going to get as high of a percentage of those leads to schedule a consultation in the first place as we should, in order for the numbers to back out for it to be profitable, right? We do our best to try to lighten the load on our clients in particular, as far as that aspect of it is concerned, because we have automations and AI and real life human being appointment setters that help with that. But at the end of the day, nobody, literally no one, has as high of a likelihood of converting a lead into a consultation, into a shown consultation, and into a paying new client as the artists themselves, right? Especially when you're on video, right? David,
Sure.
You know this. So when we, let's say we script out a video for an artist, we run that ad with the artist on the video, and then the artist themselves is the one who actually follows up with the lead. They're like, oh, you're the person I saw in the video, right? So it breeds familiarity, it breeds trust before you've ever even spoken to the lead. So yeah, no one's going to trust. No one's going to garner as much trust as the artist themselves, especially when the artist was the one on camera in the ad or in the organic piece of content, whatever generated the lead in the first place. So yeah, that's ultimately, it's super important for the artist to be very engaged in the process with their leads.
People think that they're paying for leads when they hire a marketing agency. In reality, artists really paying you. If we go to Seven Figure SMP, what's the reality of it? What are we actually paying you for?
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely multifaceted in our case, right? Because of course you are going to get leads, right? But you're also going to get brand awareness, of course, right? And because of what we spoke about earlier, it's not even just brand awareness, right? Because brand awareness is important, but we're also making people aware that the service exists in the first place. So it's even a layer before brand awareness is becoming product aware that scalp micropigmentation even exists, right? Of people in your local area, right? So when you do that, and this is why we run search and social in combination with one another, right? Because when you do that, right? When you are running ads on social, inherently you're planting the seed in people's minds who don't necessarily take action on your ad right away, that eventually will search for scalp micropigmentation or hair tattoo or some other creative form of searching for the service in the future, right? So you're literally creating more future search demand when you're running ads on socials, right? So you're creating product awareness, meaning, okay, these people know that scalp micropigmentation is even a thing. And they also know who you are, right?
Today, I want to talk to you about something crucial for your SMP business, where you get your tools. It's not just about having the right tools, it's about getting them from a source you can trust. And that's why I recommend Palms Fashion. Palms Fashion has been serving professionals since 1991, right here in the heart of New York City. Your tools and supplies are an investment in your craft and your success as an SMP artist. So don't just buy from anywhere. Trust the experts at Palms Fashion. Whether you're in New York City or shopping online at palmsfashioninc.com, they've got everything you need to take your business to the next level. Remember, trust the best, trust Palms Fashion. Ever wonder what keeps me focused and energized during long SMP sessions and Scalp Solutions podcast? It's Wava Water. Wava isn't just water, it's a whole new experience. It combines lightly caffeinated sparkling water with binaural beats of sound frequencies and music. Together, they help boost creativity, productivity, and focus. And here's the best part. It's as refreshing as it is delicious. So, whether you're creating that perfect hairline for a client or tuning in to elevate your SMP game with the Scalp Solutions podcast, Wobble Water keeps you refreshed and ready to perform at your best. Because great work starts with great tools and great hydration. Wobble Water. Refresh your focus, boost your confidence. Find out more at wobblewater.com.
Got some
In
personal
addition
branding.
to, and that's before anybody ever even becomes a lead, right? And then once they become a lead, we're also pretty good at getting a high percentage of those leads to actually schedule a consultation. And then we do our best to ensure that as high of a percentage of those people as possible actually show up to their consultation. And then even once you convert them into a paying new client, we'll help you to coordinate your sessions as well. Now, this helps us in a bunch of different ways. It helps us track the 4 metrics that we were talking about earlier, literally tracking the process from end to end, from lead to booked consultation to shown consultation to paying new client. But the other thing it helps us with is to identify what's actually bringing you paying new clients versus what's bringing you the most or the cheapest leads, right? Because sometimes there's a dichotomy there. Sometimes we have an ad, like for instance, right now with you, one of your new ads that you just shot for us is getting a lead cost of sub $5, right? It's like $4.20 or something like that, a lead. Now,
Which,
that
just
seems
real
great,
quick,
and it's a
James,
great.
I'm sorry to when you put those numbers out there, can you let us know if is a $4, $5 lead? Is that a good number? Is that high? XYZ? Just as you go explaining, like in terms of
That's a very, very good lead cost, because keep in mind, obviously, the leads are, it's not like going right into your DMs. Obviously, you know that, right, David? So they're going through some pre-qualification questions, answering those, then entering their contact info, then agreeing to be followed up with, right? We have a paragraph where we say, hey, if you fill this out, we are going to follow up with you, right? Which should make you less timid to follow up with the people, right? Hopefully, because we're getting them to tick that little box that says, okay, I agree to be followed up with. And yeah, so like a typical lead cost, a solid lead cost on social is like $25 a lead or less. So when we're getting, and that's about, what your account averages account wide. So when we have a creative that's, generating leads that are that low of that significantly different from the average in the account, then of course that's going to catch our attention, right? We're going to say, oh man, this thing is crushing it right now. But we also need to make sure that it's not attracting the wrong people, right? So, in this case, it's super early on. So it's like a little too early to say, hey, did these leads that came in for less than $5 convert into a paying client just yet? But that's exactly what we're going to be keeping our eye on. Are they actually scheduling consultations? Are they showing up to those consultations? What is David's feedback on those consultations once they show up, right? And if all those things are in line, then of course we're going to hammer that particular creative.
Yeah, go all in.
if it turns out that a bunch of those people are wasting your time, then we have to disregard the fact that that lead cost is really good, right? Because we might have a different ad in the ad account that's at that average, $25 lead cost, but 1 out of every 2 is booking a consult, and out of the consults that are booked, 3 out of every 4 are showing up, and out of the ones that show up, you're closing 50% of them, right? So if all those metrics are flesh out like that, and the cheap lead cost is not producing any qualified leads or qualified consultations, then we have to kind of not be blinded by that cheap lead cost, which is really easy to do, right? It's easy for an agency to do that. It's even easy for an individual to do that. When they see one particular ad that's generating leads at a super low cost, you just are naturally going to assume like, oh man, this thing is crushing it.
Yeah, this is great.
But that may not be the case, right? Especially if the objective, and I don't want to get too technical here, but if you're doing DM ads and you have no filtering, that means every time you get a DM, whether it's, hey, I'm interested in learning more about this service, or why did I see this ad? I don't want to see this, right? No matter what the context of that DM is, it's firing a lead event back to the platform. So all it knows is it got somebody to send you a message, whether that message is good, bad, or otherwise. So that's where you can really, get in trouble with, not get in trouble, but go down, like have the algorithm optimized for the wrong type of people when you don't have any filtering in the post-click experience for your leads,
Speaking of DMs, what is it that separates Seven Figure SMP from all these other Facebook ad agencies that are targeting SMP and PMU artists, which I feel like every week a new one is popping up and sliding into the DMs?
Yeah. I mean, at the end of the day, the reality is I don't know of any that offer as holistic of an approach as we do, right? So we advertise on either 1 or up to 5 different platforms, which include Google, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube, right? And then in addition to the fact that we advertise on those platforms, we also, as you know, assist you with the content creation process in terms of scripting your ads. You just shoot the raw, send it back to us. Of course, you have a beautiful video setup, but you don't have to. I mean, we literally have people who pull out their iPhone and shoot it and send it back to us, and their ads crush it anyway. And then we take care of all the editing, landing pages, pre-qualification, automated follow-up, and real life human being appointment setters. And then we also give each individual client their own dedicated Slack channel, which is where you have access to not only me, but my entire team every single day. And then we do as often as a weekly check-in on Zoom as well. So that is a unique combination that I don't think I've seen, one of our competitors have. Maybe they do, but I don't think I've seen them have that. But at the end of the day, it boils down to the fact that we've managed literally millions of dollars on Google ads, on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, and Google for scalp micropigmentation specifically. And we've generated, hundreds of thousands of leads at this point, literally tens of thousands of paying clients across all of our accounts. So, I don't think anybody has that kind of blended amount of experience when it comes to advertising for scalp micropigmentation specifically, and then also doing it sustainably. Like I mentioned, we first started doing it in 2020 and then started doing it for multiple clinics starting in 2022. And we've been able to kind of sustain those results across different economic times and things of that nature, right? So for instance, from the sentiment that I've gotten, like 2025 generally was, a tough year in scalp micropigmentation, as an industry as a whole. And we still have artists who literally had record-breaking years, right? So, obviously, again, it's not linear, right? Like you always say, it's a roller coaster. And when you work with as many different artists in as many different regions as we do, of course, you're going to see ups and downs across the board. But, yeah, we've been able to really kind of have sustainable and consistent success and help people to succeed, not just in the boom times, right? In like the post-COVID, everybody's got extra money in their pocket times, but also in the tougher years as well.
And I tell you what, having access for me personally to the entire team via the Slack app, that has been golden for me, because anytime I have a question, I know I leave my questions for you because I know you're the guy, running off. So I make sure it's a really important question before I reach out to you. But there has not been any time that I've posted a question or given videos or photos that were requested from me, and more than 24 hours before I got some sort of feedback. So like that to me has always been like prices, having access to the team and the whole team. So we're talking about the editors, the managers, Angie, who helps me with, contacting the leads, and she shuts them down. She's an absolute animal. Sometimes I see when a lead comes in and then not even 30 seconds, the email's already sent out establishing it, and I got a consultation booked. So this is me speaking from a personal perspective. Just that right there alone, I haven't experienced that with any other companies that I've dealt with, is actually having access to a whole team and not just that one individual person. And that becomes very difficult when it's just a one-man army trying to maintain all these questions and tasking out all these other things. Not saying that it can't be good, but I'm just saying, ever since I've been rocking with you guys have streamlined that process for me. So I absolutely, I appreciate that.
Yeah, and that's completely out of necessity, right, David? Because otherwise I become the bottleneck. And when that happens, and it did happen at a point, before we had, account managers and appointment setters and operations managers and things of that nature, it leaves me in a tough spot because there's only so many hours in the day, right?
Yeah.
And it doesn't mean that I'm not involved, because we have a team meeting every single day at 10 a.m. where we discuss the health of all accounts. And obviously any accounts that need my specific attention, the team is letting me know, like, hey, James, like, we already tried to resolve this. We don't know what the heck to do. Please help us. Right. And same thing, like you said, if there's something in your mind that needs to be escalated to me, then you have a direct line to me as well. And that's always the way we treat it, right? Because at the end of the day, like, there's still only so many hours in the day, but at the same time, there are certain things that are going to require my expertise, because this is not something that this is something that I built, right? So I built this myself for one clinic. And then I also built it in a way where it was able to be scaled, right? And then I created standard operating procedures for the team to follow, of course. So they have a really, really good understanding, because I trained them personally on how the system was built. But at the end of the day, the one who knows it inside and out is me. So the buck stops at me in terms of, like, sometimes there's things that are going to need to come to me. And then the other thing is, sometimes there's, it's dynamic, right? It's not static. So sometimes there's changes that happen, like, for instance, the Andromeda update that happened with regards to Meta. And again, I don't want to get overly technical, that could be a whole entire separate podcast. But essentially what that caused was our system that we had in place and the processes that we had in place for advertising, specifically on Meta, basically needed to change overnight, right? And they are not going to iterate on those changes, need to make those changes, test them, validate them. Then once they've been validated, then we can, kind of make that wholesale change across the entire agency. And that's exactly what we did, right? So
Sure.
It's actually super exciting, because we've actually had clinics that are starting to get better results than they ever had before those changes happened, right? Because of the changes on Meta and because of the way that we adapted to those changes, right? Because what happens is other people are still trying to do what always worked for them, even though it doesn't work for them anymore, right? They haven't even caught up. They haven't adapted to the changes. Whereas I don't want to say we're ahead of the curve, but we're at least adapting as those changes are taking place in a timely fashion before the majority of the competitors have even caught up, right? And ultimately, especially here in January, this first week of January, we have a client wins channel, David, right? Where every time a client tells us that they closed a deal or scheduled a first session, we send all those messages into one internal channel, right? This week, the first 7 days of January, it's busier than it's been in a very long time, right?
That's awesome.
Which makes me excited for the SMP industry as a whole for 2026, because I've just seen so many deals closing here in the first 7 days of the new.
That's awesome. Speaking of wins, what does success realistically look like in the first 60 to 90 days when everything is all set up correctly?
Yeah. So ultimately, what we like to do in the first month is obviously, get everything prepared as far as content. There's a little back and forth, as right? Our team is pretty good. We get it close to being ready to go on the first draft, but you are going to have your input as an artist and say, hey, I don't like this before and after there, or I want to add this kind of B-roll here or this kind of image there. And then once we make those tweaks, we go live, right? And as you've experienced, we're going to get leads and consultations starting right away, right? So that's going to start within the first 24 hours. But ultimately, what has to happen is we have to learn how to work together and create that well-oiled machine over the first month, 2 months, 3 months, et cetera, in terms of knowing each other's preferences and, all that kind of good stuff, right? And really what's going to happen is the artist is going to be getting adapted to using our system. We're going to be getting to know the artist. And then we're also going to, because all the calls are tracked and recorded, in the CRM, right? So we're also going to help the artist when it comes to refining their consultation, at least when it comes to the phone consultations, right? So we're going to actually analyze those calls and give them constructive criticism, what they did well, maybe what they could have improved upon, and what the perceived likelihood of that particular consultation is of closing, and what they can do to get better on their next consultation, right? So that's really what's going to happen during that first month and during those first 2 months. Now, it's not uncommon for artists who have the right foundation and already have a good portfolio to see deals closing in their first month as well, right? So, for instance, we just had one start in the Washington, I think Seattle type area. Guy's already established. He's already got a good portfolio, right? So we're not making him, we're throwing fuel on the fire that he already started on his own, right? And because of that, I think he closed 3 or 4 deals in his first month. And that's not uncommon for us to see.
Uh-huh.
Of course, we want to see, 1 or 2 deals close in the first month to make you break even and even a little bit profitable in your first month compared to what you invested on our management fee plus your ad spend. And then really in months 2, 3, and 4, that's where we like to start to see, you hit your averages based on what your ad spend is, right? Because some people are spending $1,000 a month. Some people are spending 3. Some people are spending 5. We even have a select few that are spending in the 10K range, right? In terms of their ad spend. So of course, the overall volume is going to vary based on how much you're spending on ads, what your region is, what your portfolio is. But whatever those averages are, whatever those targets are, we're going to establish those before you ever even become a client. Hey, based on the ad spend that you're saying that you want to invest and your region and your portfolio, this is what we project in months 1, 2, 3, and 4. And we even give, a performance satisfaction guarantee with regards to that as well.
Can we talk about timing a little bit more? Because I feel like a lot of artists, especially the ones that have reached out to me since the last podcast that I put about when to hire a marketing agency, a lot of them are like, oh, I gave them 1 month and they didn't do anything. And it's kind of like, can you give us the information that we all need to hear about? You're not going to get shit done in 30 days. Let's just be honest. There's no real success to just giving any marketing agency 30 days to fucking make you the 6 figures your trainer told you were going to get as soon as you completed your SMP training. What do you think is a reasonable time to allow a company to perform what they have to?
Yeah. So Again, well, first of all, I like 120 days in terms of an initial campaign, right? That's my preferred timeline. At the end of the day, I've gone month to month with people right out of the gate if I think they're like established and all that kind of good stuff, and they're like, oh, I don't want to be locked into a contract. But 120 days is our typical initial campaign length, and then we roll month to month thereafter, right? The reason for that is because, I mean, for instance, like we have a really high retention, right? We have like 90+% retention. But, you know, when you work with over 200 artists, that still means you got a couple dozen people who've churned, right? And we had one that churned this month, right? That literally went month to month right out of the gate, like I just explained to you. Got 40 leads, closed 2 deals in their first month, profitable. And churned anyway, right? So now that's a bummer for us because it's like, hey man, like based on the metrics,
Yeah,
you know,
doing
first
good.
of all,
you're on your way.
You already made money, and this is going to lead to a profitable campaign in the long run. So if you want to offboard, of course, we agreed to go month to month with you right out of the gate. So we're going to let you go. But at the end of the day, if I'm advising you, this has the metrics that match our other profitable campaigns, right? So again, that is the reason why I like 120 days. Typically, though, you should see signs that it's moving in the right direction, even within the first 30 days. And again, what does that look like? It looks like qualified leads being generated. You're actually speaking to some of those leads. When you speak to them, you get the feeling that you could potentially close them, whether they close or not, and you close a deal or two, right? Like that's what a successful first 30 days looks like to me, right? And then in the second 30 days, you know, a similar thing happens with regards to new leads coming in. And then you also have that pipeline that you built up in the first 30 days, right? So what if I close another 1 or 2 in the second 30 days? And I also close 1 or 2 old ones from the previous 30 days. Well, now I just ended up with 4 heads this month, and now it's looking pretty good, right? So that's really what I like to see. And there's a lot that has to go right in order for that to happen. But it's definitely not unreasonable to have that expectation, assuming that the person that's administering it on your behalf, whether it's yourself or anyone else, right, is doing it. And you are bought into that process as the artist as well. So I think that if the system is set up properly and being run properly, and the artist is bought into it, already has the right foundation, already has a portfolio, that's certainly realistic to see those things happen. I think where people get off track is having different expectations, right? Having loftier expectations. Because at the end of the day, like let's look at it from a standpoint of averages as far as numbers, right? Even if your price point is only 2K, which let's say that's your average price point blended across your big jobs like me that are $3,500 and your small little hairline jobs that are only $1,300. So even if your price point is only 2K, that means that if you do 4 heads in a month, that's $8,000 worth of revenue. Now, of course, it's not all profit, but your margins on everything else other than advertising is going to be pretty high in scalp micropigmentation, which is what makes it an appealing business model in the first place, right? So if you spend $1,000, right, to get $8,000, that's literally an 8x return on ad spend. And if you were talking to any like e-commerce person or, you know, obviously, you know, you work with physical product type of people, if they're getting X return on their ad spend, they're ecstatic, right?
Fucking through the roof.
Right. Exactly. So the only thing that you should be doing is, first of all, looking to do that same thing consistently and potentially spend more and see if you can keep an 8X as you spend a little bit more. Increase your budget 20% and then increase it another 20% and so on and so forth. And of course, you will hit a point of diminishing return where like, oh, I'm spending X amount and now I'm not getting an 8X anymore. I'm only getting a 6X return or a 4X return or whatever the case may be. But that is, I think, the biggest thing where people have a misstep, right? Is they're like, oh, I spent $1,000 and I only got 2 people.
Yeah.
It's like,
hear that all the time.
You spent $1,000 and you got 2 people and you charge them $4,000, right? So you got a 4X return on your ads. So like, that's pretty good. You didn't lose money. You made money. You were profitable. You should do that again and see if you can get even better at it. And then follow up with the people who are already in your pipeline, because you already paid for those leads, right? So when you close those people who are already in your pipeline, it's pure profit, right?
Some of the conversations that I've had with artists, and I tell them, I was like, well, the issue is your whole pricing structure. Because it's like, okay, I had 3-4 clients, and it's like, okay, but what you charging them? And they're like, oh, $1,000, $1,500 for what? I'm like, well, of course you're upset. This has nothing to do with the marketing agency, my guy. Do you even know your numbers? Like, why are you charging so low? You're gonna always be on the chase. You just invested $3,000, $4,000 into your marketing, but you're charging $1,000 for Norwood 7, my guy. Of course, you're never going to be happy when it comes to that. I want to get to the next question.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Because that's a red flag for me. I feel like that's a red flag. And I want to ask you, what are some of the red flags that tell you that an artist is about to blame the agency instead of fixing their foundation?
Yeah. Well, if we want to piggyback off that last point, I mean, price point is obviously one of them, right? And I am not going to, name any of my clients just out of respect for them. But ultimately, like, I have one client in Colorado that consistently does their Norwood 7 still for $3,500, right? And I have one in Texas where like they're consistently around like 1,800, $2K for every single head that they do, regardless of the type of job that it is, right? So, I mean, just do the math on it, right? If they're both investing the same amount in me and they're both investing the same amount in their ads, and one of them does 4 Norwood 7s at 3,500, that person made 14K that month. So that person loves me. They think I'm amazing, right? And then the other person who's doing 1,800 does the same 4 heads. They made $7,200. So like they made money, they're profitable, but they're kind of like, I'm not so sure. Like, it's cool, I'm making money, but it's not. I wish I was making more, right? And nothing was materially different in terms of the advertising, the ad spend, the amount that they're paying for their management fee, the follow-up systems. None of that was materially different. The only thing that's different at the end of the day is the price point. And you can also assume that the sales ability of one person versus the other is different, because if one is able to close at 3,500 and the other one's having to go down to 1,800 to close, then it's those two things, right? It's the price point and the sales ability is the difference between those two fictitious artists, which are not really fictitious.
They need a sales course.
We're not going to name them.
They need a sales course. Listen, stop charging your clients $1,800 and then coming on Instagram saying you charge $5,000. We know who you are. If an SMP or a PMU artist is listening right now and they're thinking about hiring a marketing agency, what should they do this month before talking to anyone?
They should. So let's assume this person has
fresh out.
Well, let's do 2 different ones. Let's do someone who's never advertised and someone who has a foundation and has advertised, even if it's on their own, right? So the person who's never run ads, they're fresh out of training. First and foremost, they gotta, and I know this is a little redundant because we talked about it earlier in the pod, they have to have their website, Google business profile, and socials all aligned, right? It doesn't have to be the most amazing website ever. They can build it on their own if they want to. There's plenty of AI tools and all that, templates and all that kind of good stuff that they can use to figure out how to build their own website and make it at least halfway decent, right? That's step one. The other thing is, and we talked about this earlier, they have to get comfortable talking to anybody and everybody who will listen to them about scalp micropigmentation. And then they also have to get comfortable or even uncomfortable being on camera, right? One easy place for anybody to start is their founder story. Obviously, David, you already know about this, but founder story is something that we preach as an organic piece of content and as an ad. And it's simply, how and why you started your business. So it doesn't matter whether you have a portfolio or not. Every single SMP artist can do a founder story video, and they all should, right? So that's a great starting point for somebody who's never run ads, that has no experience, Because ultimately, you really want to have like 6 to 12 heads under your belt before you run any ads, even if you're running them on your own. The only exception I would say is if you're going to run ads on your own, be honest and do a model call and do it for extremely cheap or free, and let them know that the exchange is that I'm going to use you in my future advertising, right? So I'm not going to do it for free.
I'm going to make you famous.
Yeah, exactly. So that's the way I would approach it if I were brand new. Now, if I were somebody who either had already worked with an agency in the past, or maybe I'm currently working with an agency that I'm about to leave, or maybe I'm running my own ads and I'm getting too busy to continue to manage my own ads, then I want to know the 4 metrics that we talked about earlier. What is my cost per lead? What is my cost per consultation? What is my cost per shown consultation? And what does it cost for me to acquire a new client? Now, some of those metrics require manual input, right? Like if you weren't tracking how many consultations you booked and how many showed up along the way, then you might have to skip those 2. But bare minimum, you should know cost per lead, right? Because you should know how much you spent and how many contacts you have. So that's a math operation. Take the total number of contacts, divide it by the total number you spent. That's your blended average cost per lead across all platforms, right? And then how many heads did you do, right? Take how many heads you did in that time frame, divide it by the total ad spend. That's your cost to acquire a client. So if you know those 2, you're probably ahead of most artists, to be honest with you, even experienced ones. Because a lot of them, if I were to ask them these questions, unless they're like super deep into their advertising, they don't know the answer, right? They can pull it up maybe, right? By saying, oh, how much did I spend on Facebook? How much did I spend on Google? How many leads do I have in my CRM? How many of them book consultations? They can maybe scramble to pull it up, but they don't have it at their fingertips, meaning they're not tracking it along the way. We make that a little bit easier for you. We do track it along the way. We also have a dashboard that tells you all that information. We do need some manual input though, right? So we need to know who shows up and who converts, because that aspect of it requires manual input from whoever's taking the consultations regardless. There's nothing we can do to automate that ever, right? That portion of it will always require manual input from the artist. Now, of course, we try to make it as easy as possible for you to give us that input. And if you're trying to calculate these numbers based on consultations that have already happened, then you need to look at your CRM or your Calendly or whatever. And because you didn't market in the past, no offense, I know you didn't, you're going to have to just rely on memory and go back and say, okay, I spoke to this guy. I didn't speak to that guy. I spoke to this guy, and calculate, how many people showed up, right? So those are the things you need to bring to a call with a marketing agency to have a purely data-driven conversation. Now, of course you can have a conversation and go by gut feel, right? And emotion. And a lot of times it's a mixture of both. Like it's going to be a little bit of logic and a little bit of logic and a little bit of gut feel, because man, so many people just don't really have clean numbers with regards to, how much did they spend? How many consultations did they book? How many of those showed up and how many did they close, right? I mean, I literally just did this exercise for my own agency at the end of the year, right? I looked at how much we spent for the year, I do a 2-call process, right? So I do an introductory call and a demo. So I am measuring a little bit more metrics than you guys have to, right? Because I'm looking at how many leads did I generate? How many introductory calls did I book? Out of those intro calls, how many of them converted into demos? And out of those demos, how many did I actually close, right? So it's an extremely similar process. The reason I say that is I don't expect our artists to do anything that I don't do in my own business, if that makes sense to you.
Yeah, absolutely. Of course, brother James, I appreciate you and thank you for always keeping it real. If this episode didn't change how you think about marketing, you probably weren't ready anyway. You gotta do the work first, then let marketing, someone like James, Mr. Viola, amplify it. That's going to wrap it up for this episode of the Scalp Solutions Podcast. Until the next time, peace. Thanks again, James.
Talk soon.
If you're a PMU or SMP trainer, I know you've worked hard to build your own unique training style. So why trust someone else's curriculum? Here's why. Micropigmentation educators didn't just create another course. They built a system that actually strengthens your brand. Their program teaches real fundamentals rooted in facts, not opinions or product bias. Just the kind of foundations your students really need. They take care of the theory, the textbooks, the online course, scoring matrix, testing, even trainer support, so you can stay focused on hands-on education. It's professional, proven, and ready to plug into your business. Check it out at www.mpeducators.com. What's up, everyone? David Santiago here. Let's talk about taking your SMP business to the next level with Guild Payment Solutions. Cash is king, but what happens when your client doesn't have cash? That's where a reliable credit card processing solution comes in. With Guild Payment Solutions, you can securely accept cards, manage transactions, and get paid faster, whether you're running a studio or selling products online. It's more than just convenience, it's a business upgrade. Credit card processing builds trust, keeps your finances organized, and ensures that you'll never lose a paying client. Don't hold your business back. Visit guildpaymentsolutions.com today and see how they can transform the way you operate your SMP business.